Well, hello there, everyone. Hopefully, you're doing well out there in YouTube world. Every day is a fascinating journey, isn't it? Remember, I'm Mazske Finance. I'm not a financial advisor, CPA, or an attorney, or nothing like that. I'm just a normal blue collar guy. And sometimes I think back in my life, and let's see. I'm going to talk about the importance of just getting started investing. Okay? A lot of you have heard my story on my channel, or if you watched my talk with Dion the other day on his channel, you heard some of my story there. But I started back in 1990 with small investments in mutual funds. Okay. And when I think back on that, if I had never started, where would I be at right now? Okay. And if I had started, if I had never bought my first rental property in 2017, where would I be at right now? All right. Mutual funds back in the day were great. Individual stocks, as you probably heard me say, I did very well on that. I beat most mutual funds. I beat most of these so-called, in quotes, gurus out there. I just did. But when you don't have a lot of money, it takes a while to compound and grow, but it will compound and grow. Okay. Now, along the way, something I haven't mentioned too much, but I have mentioned before. Along the way on my journey, I did stop and smell the roses at times. And because, especially when I left the Navy, you'll hear sometimes about military pay being low. I was enlisted. Okay. I could have gone the officer route once I was in because I got my bachelor's degree, but I turned it down. I did get promoted quickly while I was in, but that's another story. But I was able to save more money while I was on active duty than when I got out and became a police officer. When I got out and became a police officer, my starting pay was $23,000 and a couple $100. I had to work rotating shift work, 12-hour shifts, daytime, nighttime, back and forth. We worked 14 days out of 28, which sounds outstanding, right? You got 14 days off. 7 of those were daylight, 7 of those were graveyard. Say roughly 7 to 7 daylight, 7 to 7 at night, roughly. But now, to put a little glitch in that or a little torque in that, we worked those 14 shifts in a 3-week period. So in 3 weeks, we worked 7 daylight shifts, getting up, depends on where you lived at in your drive, 5:30 in the morning, 5 in the morning, and we worked 7 night shifts. So staying up all night long. But to make that just a little bit more difficult, we would work a combination of like 4 night shifts in a row, a day or two off, 3 daylights in a row, a day or so off, 3 nights in a row, a couple days off, 4 daylights in a row. And that schedule was in 3 weeks. So you're bouncing back and forth. Yes, you only worked 14 shifts out of a month, but it killed you. It killed you. And then if you were like me, you had to survive. You had to work as much overtime as you possibly could. You just had to. Because if not, my salary with 2 children at that time, I looked it up. I refused to do this because I had personal pride. And society's lacking personal pride now. But I had personal pride. But my salary qualified me for welfare benefits. It qualified us for WIC. It qualified us for, I think, food stamps. It qualified us for housing assistance. And I refused it all. I did not do any of that because I'm not going to take handouts. I'm just not. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's morally wrong. Okay? Now, if you qualify for a pension, you qualify for Social Security that you paid into, that's okay, in my humble opinion. If you're one of the millions of Americans out there who, especially if you're young and healthy, who are just living off the system, it's morally wrong. If you're a religious person, I believe it's religiously wrong. I believe if you're religious in your own benefits, I think you're violating the law of the spiritual advisor, let's say. Okay? That's just my humble opinion. We all have opinions, correct? All of us. Not all of you will agree with me. A lot of you will probably disagree with me. That's okay. So anyway, the importance of getting started. When I was a cop, though, I did buy my first house to live in. It wasn't my first house I ever bought, but it was my first house to live in as a police officer. Put $0 down because of the VA loan. I rolled closing costs into it, so I put no money down. But the house needed work. It needed work. That first winter, I moved in July, I closed on in July, or June maybe, I forget, but that first winter, I used a furnace once it got cold, and I had a gas bill that was $400. This is back in 1998. It hurt. It hurt big time. I told the missus, we can't afford to heat our house like this. I did a little research, probably in Lowe's, and bought one electric radiator style heater. They're about, 2.5, 3 feet tall. They look like a little, kind of like a radiator, like in an old house. You plug it in, it's gas, oil filled in there, oil's in there, so it heats up. We bought one. The second winter, we've had two, and by the third winter, we had three. And we never turned our furnace on again until we got a new furnace, which was around 2009, 2010, somewhere in there. The boys have memories, my two boys, in the mornings, like on days they were off, more than likely in the wintertime, the weekend probably, when we didn't have to get up and go to work when I happened to be off. We turned it on in the morning sometimes, and we'd huddle over it, our hands be outstretched. And we'd joke, be like, oh, we're like, homeless people out there with a little fire, we're trying to warm up. But this was in our house that we lived in, okay? We did that for 10 years, and we had no air conditioning. Picture this. My house was a brick house. There was time, that when I bought it, I realized the mortar in between the bricks was chipping out, cracking up. So I had within a year or two, I had just a little bit of money. So I contacted a mason and asked what they would charge me to patch up. And it was like a couple $100, $500 maybe, whatever it was. So they said they would do it sometime soon. And that's all outside work, so they would just come by whenever they did. I remember one hot summer day, I had come off working a 12-hour night. And it was like 9 o'clock in the morning maybe. And when I came home, I get home, it's like after 7 in the morning, and I gotta go to bed. There was no air conditioning in the house. Curtains were drawn, the best they could be drawn. It was still hot and sticky. I was sleeping without a shirt. Sleeping with no sheets on, because it was hot. I'd sweat when I was sleeping, because it was hot. And I started hearing this, and what it was that mason was literally right, probably, 6 inches, 12 inches from my head, scraping the mortar out. And I was just like, what a life. What a life. This is the working class America, living in the Shenandoah Valley, working for a very low paying police department, living in an old house that lacked heat and air conditioning. So anyway, I laugh about it now, but it had its moments back then. But anyway, I kept my investments in stocks, mutual fund stocks. I really had no money to add. I remember in 2003, 2004, I bought Toys R Us, and it was my first stock to double. I put maybe $500 into it. In a year's time, it went up to $1,000. My first stock that ever doubled. But in 2005, I subscribed to Stock Advisor with the Motley Fool. And I remember I mentioned stopping and smelling the roses. One of the first 3 individual stocks that I bought when I subscribed was Netflix. I just held it. I bought and held. I think I bought 2 positions in Netflix over the first year. And I just held it. It kind of did this for a long while. And it was in 2014, I believe, when the value, I kept going up. And it had enough money in there. And it happened to be in my taxable account, not in my Roth. It was in my taxable account. It had enough money in there. I realized I could do something with this money to improve my house. I debated a couple different things. I talked to a contractor about it and got some ideas. And I decided the best bang for my buck was to renovate my old, dark, dirty, dingy, spider-infested basement that I had in my house. Cold, dark, dingy. So we did. I sold my Netflix stock, pulled it out, pulled the cash out, had the check mailed to me, and then got my basement renovated. Some of my viewers, perhaps Helicopter Pilot Caleb, has slept in that basement, I believe. And it was a nice basement. If you look back to the very first video I have on my channel, I was in that basement filming a video on my last day I was in Virginia before I came down here. I started making videos 6 months before that, but I had deleted all those videos for a reason. Okay, so I had like 225 videos that I deleted. And that's the first video I have in my Virginia house before I came here. Because I could look at it sometime. I haven't looked at it since then, but I could look at it to remind myself what the basement looked like. But it was a very nice basement. It was my Netflix paid for basement. Okay, that's how I smelled the roses. We also added a bathroom down there, so for the first time in our lives, we had 2 bathrooms in our house. By that time, the oldest son was going off to the Coast Guard Academy. The youngest son was still there for another year till he graduated college and went off to the Coast Guard Academy. But we had 2 bathrooms, so it was pretty nice. But then in 2016, as I mentioned on Dion's channel, I was in Savannah, Georgia at an Airbnb. Our financial situation had improved. The missus had started working part-time after about 6 months of moving in at a YMCA, watching kids in the playroom. And at $100 a week she would make, it gave us some breathing room. $100 a week gave us some breathing room. And several years after that, I forget how many years, now probably 2 or 3 years, she went to work in a preschool because parents loved her, kids loved her. She went to work in a preschool, got a full-time job, 40 hours a week, but it paid like about minimum wage or thereabouts. But again, that was then a couple $100 a week. Life got better. But then around 2009 or so, right in the Great Recession, remember, she became a temp in a factory. And I'll tell you where it is now because we no longer live there. She no longer works there. It's been a year since she's been here. A year today. It's our 1-year anniversary of the missus joining me here in Florida. But she worked at Hershey Chocolate. There's a factory in the Shenandoah Valley. It's a very well-paying job for that area. And she started off as a temp worker. And she had been there pushing a year, and this was probably 2010-ish then, at the depth of the recession, I believe, when they were advertising they're accepting applications for full-time employees. And she went over at a hotel over in the next city. And there was literally 5,000 people that came that day to apply for jobs because people have been laid off all over and people needed jobs. Somehow, she got hired. When she got hired, almost from day one, her salary was almost what I was making as a police officer. And that just changed our life. In a 2-year period, we went to Hershey Park up in Hershey, Pennsylvania 7, 8 times because we loved roller coasters, especially me and the boys. We'd ride every single roller coaster in Hershey Park during the course of a day, plus all the other rides. And they had like, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 roller coasters. So it was great fun. And we started doing different things, and we had a little bit of pocket change, shall we say. 2015, I paid my personal residence off because I hated having a mortgage. Paid it off. It took me 17, 18 years. And let me see what time it is. Okay. I got a pool lady coming in 30 minutes to look at my pool to give me an estimate on rehabbing it. Life has changed for me. So then we paid it off in January 2015. My youngest son then graduated from high school in June of 2015, and within a month, he was up in New London, Connecticut at the United States Coast Guard Academy. So by that time, we had no children in the house, a paid-off house. The missus and I were both still working full-time. And so it was 2015. 2016, we started taking vacations. Savannah, Georgia was the first one. I got interested in rental property. I came back to the Shenandoah Valley. I contacted a real estate agent. By January of 2017, I closed on my very first rental house, which I still have today. And I bought that. And it took me a little while to learn this because I had no mentor. I had no YouTube channel. I had read no real estate books. I went into it willingly saying, I'm going into it blindly and I'll see what happens. I did that intentionally. And because that's just, sometimes I jump and see what happens. So I did. And I struggled. I ended up in the hospital, not the hospital, I ended up going to the doctor for something. Stress can kill. Stress can kill because it stressed me out. But by June, I had my second tenants in there, and that was a family, husband, wife, 2 kids, I think it was, and they paid me rent. And by December, I closed on my second rental. By May of the following year, I closed on a triplex, and by August or so, I closed on a single-family house in Birmingham, Alabama. By that time, somewhere along that way, I realized the power of real estate. I realized real estate beats stocks hands down. I realized I could buy real estate with little money out of my pocket at times, especially to get started because I used a small HELOC of $30,000 to help me get started. that first house I used, I think it was like $17-ish thousand to assist me towards the down payment because I didn't have a lot of money. That's how I got started. I did not have a lot of money. So if you're sitting out there, this is the point of this. If you're sitting out there and you don't have a lot of money, but you got a little bit, you're working a job, you have credit, you can apply for a mortgage when that day comes. There's a way you can buy rental property. There's always a way if you want it. If you want it, if you really want it, you can buy a rental property. Don't let nobody tell you you can't. Don't let nothing hold you back. Don't risk things to get it necessarily, but there are folks out there who pull cash out of credit cards to use as a down payment. I wouldn't do that, but people have done that and turned out to be very successful. But you gotta do whatever it is you can do to get on that property ladder. Because trust me, if you do it correctly, you run the numbers, you are positively cash flowing, you get a decent tenant, it will truly change your life probably more than almost anything else will. I'm telling you straight up, my wife changed my life, my 2 kids changed my life, but buying that first rental property, I believe, changed the macro picture of my life better in a way. It's hard to say better than my kids or my spouse. Maybe I can't, we'll just take them out of the picture, we won't count them. But more than anything else, that changed my life, all right? Because that led to me getting my second, my triplex, my other one, and more and more. And within 4 years, I had 25. And 2 months after that, 2 months after my 4-year anniversary, January, February, March, I moved down here to Florida, where I now have a dock and a tiki hut. I've had one person looking at my pool because I have a swimming pool. I got a second lady coming today to give me an estimate. And the bad thing with estimates, they take a week or so to get the estimates. But I'm in a position in life, I can do this. I can do it. It still amazes me at times. It still amazes me. Because as I always say, and people say, I say this too much. People say it's not true. But I always say, if I can do it, so can you. If anyone out there, it's a big world, but we'll stick with the United States. If anyone out there who's working a job wants to get a rental property, then I say you can do it. You got to look in the mirror. You got to fix your credit. You got to fix your finances. And this video is not about fixing your finances, but you got to fix your personal finances, fix your credit, and then you got to do it. Don't let the naysayers stop you. You got to do it. And when you get started, it'll take a while. It's slow. It doesn't happen overnight. You might do it faster than me. You might do it slower than me. It might take you 10 years to get to 25 units. You might do it in 2 years. I don't know. You know, you might buy multifamily and by the time you're 4 years, you got 200 units. I don't know. You're different than me. Don't copy me. Learn from some of my stories and better your life that way. Okay? But anyway, this is long enough. I need to get off. That lady's coming here in a bit. So looking forward to meeting her, and we'll see how long she takes to get an estimate for me, and we'll see how that plays out. Y'all take care. Stay safe. Maskies signing out.